Cool. All right. Well, let's get underway. Um, so yeah, welcome. My name's Nick Olson, as I mentioned before, and I have Kieran McMaster, who is the head of our support team. She's also on the call, and she will be able to answer questions in the Q&A. So really, what we're going to talk about today is how you can use PredictWind on your passage from Panama to French Polynesia in particular. We're not going to so much do the routing, but we are going to talk about how you do the routing and the models and all that sort of thing, and other things that you can features that you can use and look at. So yeah, so let's get into it. I'll share my screen, and as it's a smaller group, I am actually happy to answer questions along the way if you feel that's needed. Kieran, you can interject as you see fit. And I will come over here. So, and it's good that we've actually answered that question at the beginning, because I can about your connection types, because then we can really talk about these apps and how we use them. Yeah, so we have two apps as such. So we have the PredictWind app, and you can use this, when you're at home, when you're at the marina, and I use it every day. I look at it before I get out of bed, and so that's on iOS, Android, and it's also the same as if you were on a web browser, and you went to the forecast website, which is what we'll look at later when we set up polars for our boat. And I just need to close one of these windows there. So, that's our cellular Wi-Fi connection. So the reality is, if you've got Starlink on board, you can use this. I guess my caution around that is you'd probably be better to be using the offshore app, because if you disconnect or you want to come back and look at what you're looking at 10 minutes ago or an hour ago or 2 hours ago, in the PredictWind app, it doesn't save that data offline. So as soon as you disconnect it, your weather routing, you can go back and see your old route, but you actually need to run it all again. So it's fantastic, lots of information there, but doesn't save your data offline. So if you're a Starlink user and you are concerned about power and you turn it off, then for everyone, I would recommend using the offshore app, mainly because all your data is saved offline. So your routes, your currents, AIS data, it's all saved when you're not connected, or if you just want to come back and see what you were looking at before, see how, where you are along your route. You can see that all in the offshore app. So all the files are transferred as GRIBs, which is just a format for our weather files. But our weather routing stays there. Everything is saved offline. So would recommend, no matter what your connection type, that you use the offshore app. For those of you using an Iridium Go and an exec, this is what you have to use because you can control your file size. So, and even on your Starlink, you may want to think about data and what you're downloading. If it were me, I'd be downloading everything I can get. But the fact that it's there, if you do have a problem, if there is a power outage, you lose your connection, everything's still there. So that's sort of the apps that we have. As we go through, I'll talk about weather models, and we'll sort of cover off, especially for this type of passage, the models, why we might want to have more than one model, and possibly what I would do looking at the different weather models with our routing. I'll flick over, no, not that tab. Actually, I'll go back here and I'll just change here, and I'm going to talk about our connections. So for your Starlinkers, we are big fans of Starlink. Actually had a meeting with them yesterday about some other things that they have coming up, and we think it's fantastic. If I had a boat, I would have one, but you do need to be aware that you should have a backup, and I would not be going, in all boating, you should have redundancy for all sorts of things. And so we recommend having an exec as your backup. And this page here, Kieran can probably link it. I don't think I need to go through it too much at the moment. We do have, some reasons why why you should have a backup. And also if you're on an exec or a Go and you have a Starlink, we do have some plans that are more cost effective so that you can have a backup, right? So that, you're paying for something that you may not use, but if you need it, it's there. But we've got some cheaper plans that you can actually have that device enabled and they're ready to go if you need it. So yeah, Kieran can share that page and have a look. I think if you don't have a backup device, you should read this page. Products, and I just wanted to, because most of you are on Starlinks, if you haven't got a data hub, I would 100% recommend you get one. It means that you can do GPS tracking through your Starlink, and it does a whole lot of other things as well. But like your tracking page, which we're going to talk about the tracking for the rally. Wish that they would fix that. Boat speed 12 knots, true wind speed 11.5 knots, must be an AC boat. You can do all your tracking, but it also, if it's the data hub's connected to your NMEA, it means that your friends and family can see what the wind speed is on board, the wind direction, and your boat speed. So it's actually pretty cool for, the tracking school, but then being able to actually see that extra information from on board is pretty epic. So yeah, the tracking is one thing it does. Something that I think is pretty epic for the passage that you guys are about to do is this new feature that we're literally releasing at the moment. So in the offshore app at the moment, you can download satellite AIS, but then what we've done is with the data hub, we've developed this feature where it can ping our servers, and so you've got your standard AIS with your anywhere from 2 to 20 nautical mile range. You're basically your Insight AIS through your VHF, and then what we're doing is that we are downloading the targets outside of that range as well. So which means that you can see ships, fishing fleets, and all that sort of anything outside of your standard AIS range, and it just means that you've got a wider picture, and you can plan accordingly. So as you can see here, you've got you might have, if you've got a ship coming towards you, you got 8.5 minutes, whereas you could have hours. And how it's doing that is it is actually grabbing all the satellite targets and bringing them in, and so you can actually have that feeding into your chart plotter, or onto an iPad or whatever that you have a nav tool on, OpenCPN, whatever you have, you can actually, if you have a data hub, you can feed that information in. So it's pretty cool, and it's just a sort of another safety based feature that we've added. And just because it's a good an interesting thing to know, it will always prioritize your local targets over the over what it gets over the satellite. So your local targets are always going to be seen, and then it and then it will add in the over the horizon targets. It does AI polars. We're going to talk about polars shortly. So it will update your polars, which is very cool. And we do have an anchor app coming. Yeah, so it's lots of things that the Data Hub does, but really, if you don't have a tracking device at all, the Data Hub will do that for you. But then, as I say, you should have a backup. And so those backup plans that I talked about for the exec and the Go, they will do all your GPS tracking. And so that's probably a better way to do it. For the exec, you'll still need a Data Hub. Right, so let's move on for that. I did have the over the horizon page there, but Kieran can link that if you want to have a look. It's yeah, it's really cool. And yeah. Right, so let's get into our routing. There's a lot of really, I mean, we've been doing our weather routing for over a decade now, and the weather routing that developments we've done in the last couple of years are really, in my opinion, have sort of lifted it above and beyond anything else that you can get or use. Knowing where you're going to be in 2 days' time, in a day's time, in 10 days' time is critical for your safety. Knowing what the potential sea state you're going to sail into is critical for safety. It's just, and the warnings that you get in the routing and all that stuff, things that you might miss. It's an essential thing to have. I wouldn't be going offshore without our weather routing tool, because it just gives you so much information. And that's what we're going to go through today is how you set it up, and some of the features that you get, and how you use it. So as I mentioned just before about polars, so polars, if you don't know what they are, that's how fast your boat goes in any given conditions. And so we're actually, so we're looking at the wind and all the 6 models that we have, global models. And then, in some places around the world, you are getting the regional models as well, like the NAM, for example. We put that together with the GFS. But the weather routing is looking at the wind. It's looking at the currents, so the ocean and tidal currents. And which we'll have a look at that a bit later. The using the ocean currents in this type of passage can shave a lot of time at sea away. But it's also looking at the wave states. So it's looking at the wind wave, the primary swell, the secondary swell, and the tertiary swell. So, I guess you put all those things together, and if you weren't using a weather routing tool that can put those things together, you're not going to be getting as good a picture. It's it's very, very clever what it's doing, and the outputs, there's a lot of information there, and we try and make that as digestible as possible. So before we can run a weather route, we need to set up our polars, and this is something that you can do at a very basic level, or you can do at a much more complex level. But obviously, if you're new to it, start with the simple stuff, and then build into it. We do have some articles about setting this up, but we're going to run through it anyway, because this is really important. Having your polars reflecting what you're actually doing on the water is as important as having the best weather models. It's really important, because if you have errors, they compound over time. So you need it's good to try and get them right. So you'll see here I have boat type. So I have I can choose from the predefined list. We have these other options here, which is sail. So that's if your boat wasn't in the predefined list, or there wasn't one like it, and that your boat, it could be quite heavy boat that sort of goes same speed roughly most of the time until it gets below 10 knots sort of thing. But that's a very, very simple way to set it up. I would recommend trying to find a predefined boat over this. Advanced is what we can do if we want to change our polars. So you'll see here we have the polar table, wind speed down here, true wind direction, and then boat speed. And then that repeats again. True wind angle, boat speed, true wind angle, boat speed. Don't need to get too stuck into that, but if you want to manually change your polars, you can. And then over here we have the AI polar. And so that's if you have a data hub, you can actually set this up that your data hub will be reading your enemy A, and so it knows when you're sailing, and it knows how fast you're going and what the true wind direction is, and so your true wind angle, and it's actually seeing how fast you go, seeing how well or badly you sail. That doesn't matter, because it's literally just reading what you're doing, and it's smart enough to know when you're sailing and when you're not. And so it will, if you're not sailing, it will discard that information and not add that into your polar. You don't end up with a whole lot of stuff in there, and that's sort of where the smarts of it come from. So yeah, it's a very cool thing, and can actually give you a really, really good polar that is replicating exactly what you do. So for today, I will just go into this predefined page here, and I will just click on that list there, and you'll see we've got all these, there's a lot of boats in here, and I'll stick with the one I've got because I've run the route for that in the offshore app. And so, yeah, I probably should have said we are on the PredictWind website, forecast website here. You see here, forecast.predictwind.com. And this is where I want to come and play around with all this stuff, get used to using the software. This is where you should start and then move to the offshore app later. You can change your polars in the offshore app, the predefined, but you can't set up your wave stuff, which we'll look at next. So you see here we have this motoring option, and I'm not going to turn that on at the moment. I can turn that on in the offshore app, but so that's if, when the boat speed goes below a certain amount, it will start, you'll turn your motor on, which you could do on this passage if you end up with some light winds. So polar speed adjustment, this is a very coarse adjustment, but can be really useful for when you're on out there. You can adjust this in the offshore app or in here. But at night, often we sail a bit slower. Sailing at night's hard, in my opinion. It's always if I'm doing some racing, sailing at night is always a challenge. You'd never sail the boat as well at night as what you can during the day, because you just can't see as much. So you can adjust that, and have that at 90%. And there's other things there as well. You might just reduce your sail at night just for safety. So yeah, we can change that polar. Tack and jibe penalties, that's a yacht racing thing, we'll ignore that. But if the router was doing too many tacks and jibes, you can actually put that penalty up a lot and it will do less. So down here, this is our wave polar. So off, on. Ignore this. Can you make a note, Kieran, to get Sam to take that out? On, off, this is your wave polar. You'll see why I want you to set this up a bit later. And so because we've chosen a predefined polar, it knows that it's a catamaran, because what we're going to do here is we're going to create a 3D model of your boat so that we know how it reacts in the waves. So we've got our displacement here. You can change these numbers, but this is what the predefined is for that particular boat. But we can change what they are, and this is the expectation here as to what we're talking about. If you're unsure as to what we're asking for there, you can just click on that and see what the specifications we're after. Depth avoidance, probably more of a coastal routing thing, but it's using a CMAP contour. So, you know, good quality data that it's using to try and avoid, you know, shallow areas. It's not a nav tool, but it definitely gives you more accurate routes in coastal situations. So, you know, I always have it turned on. Probably should go 5 meters at least, you know, but that, you know, just when you are cruising around the islands, just be aware that if you've got that turned on, it might give you some routing faults. Tidal and ocean currents, we can choose which model the router is using. We'll stick with the Mercator for this because I know it's a nice file size, and we'll run with that. This advanced routing adjustments, it's a yacht racing thing. We put it in there for the Mocha sailors. Don't worry about it. Although if you're one of those people that wants to tell me that the forecast always reads, you know, 10% lower, by all means, come in here and scale up your average wind speed. Go for it. But generally, the forecasts aren't out by 10% or don't always read low. People just don't realize that they are averages. So we'll talk about that later. The wind speeds in the wind map are averages, gusts 40% higher, up to 40% higher. So we've got our polar set up. So, and we can adjust that in the advanced polar, and we'd need to copy it over like that and then go into the advanced and change those numbers. And so when we run the route, we'll look at how that happens. Before we do that, we'll just have a look at the departure planning tool. So you'll see here we have this. So just to be clear, the departure planning tool is for planning to leave. You don't use that when you're underway. When you're underway, you use the weather routing, not the departure planning. Yeah, so, but departure planning, when we're looking at when we might leave, you know, at least for those first 5 days or so, I mean, obviously it's going to give us the full 10 days, but let's, you know, we want to be able to try and pick a nice window. We don't want to sail one day and be in 40 knots on the nose. So we can use the departure planning tool. It will give us a bunch of outputs. Let's just run it. And it'll give us a whole lot of information about, you know, wave states, passage time, minimum wind speed, maximum wind speed, average boat speed. And it can be really useful for planning whether you're like doing a day trip, or whether you're, you know, should I leave in the morning or the afternoon? I mean, you could run into some pretty nasty stuff, you know, if you left in the morning, but maybe it's going to be a much more pleasant passage if you leave in the afternoon. Obviously, this is a huge passage, and so we, you know, quite a few different considerations. But if I just flick over here to the tables, you'll see here, I'll just move my zoom controls. You know, our passage time, you know, this is a big passage, 19 days. I haven't got any motoring in there, so it would probably be quicker if I turned the motoring on. But maximum wind speed, average wind speed, minimum wind speed, and our average, and, you know, gusts. I mean, all good. So we've got a whole lot of things we can look at in here. The time upwind, the time reaching, time downwind, and this is the stuff we want. We don't want a passage where we've got 60% upwind. We want to be going reaching downwind. We're going cruising. We're not going to bash our heads into the sea. And also this here, this all looks nice, right? You know, leave on this day, you know, reaching downwind these days looks really good. In our wave states, so you know the time that we spend in these different, this is combined wind, wave, and swell. And then down here, you know, this, see here where it says time missing wave data. So that's because our wave modeling and our global models only run out to 10 days. So we've got a 20-day passage. So then from 10 days onwards, we're actually using the ECMWF ensemble to complete the passage. So that ensemble goes out to 30 days, so 10 to 30 days. We're using the ECMWF ensemble. It doesn't have wave data in it. So for half of that time, and as you see, with the fourth day, we're further away, we only have, you know, we have less wave data being calculated. But the time, and so that's why these numbers here are lower, you know, but so 50%, 50%, they match, you know, so here there's actually, yeah, these numbers are all adding up to 100, right? So we've got no time in more than 4 degrees RMS of roll. So this is why we put our boat parameters in for the wave, is so that we can see whether we've got nasty roll. So you might think my boat heels over more than 4 degrees. So this is actually degrees RMS, so the root mean square. We don't really need to worry too much about the physics of that and what that means. We need to know that it's a measure. So basically below 4 degrees, we're pretty happy. 3 can be getting up there. But over 4, things start to get pretty unfriendly. And we want to try and avoid those conditions. And because we're doing such a long passage, once we get into the weather routing and we look at this, we can go, I don't want to sail into that weather system. I'm going to sail around it. And because we've got this information, we go, oh yeah, I could see that system there, but we're going to know that it's going to throw up a massively horrible wave state after it's been through. We might run some different routes to try and avoid that wave state so that we have a nice time rather than getting tossed around for a couple of days. Again, vertical acceleration. This is your up and down. Below 0.2 G is good. Above is bad. So, and then boat slamming. Again, we've got no boat slamming in there. So, and then you'll see down here that the waves are influencing our polar. So they're probably, because we're mostly sailing downwind, they're probably speeding us up a bit. And so that wave is actually, the wave state's actually influencing our boat speed. And so we can see here the percentage of time. And we can actually look at that in more detail in weather routing. But as I say, this is departure planning. And at this face value on here, you wouldn't think that any of these days were bad to leave. But what we would do is we'd go and run weather routing for whichever day we were looking at departing. And then further, you know, nail into the intricacies of our route and how the weather was going to look. So we can come back here to our sail routing, and I can come over here and I could change the, didn't know I was in Australia. That must have been from when I was looking at the Sydney Hobart. I've been on holiday. So yeah, we can have our time zone set in here. If we're in the offshore app, it is it's using the time zone of your computer. But in the forecast site here, we can actually change our time zone to wherever we are or wherever we're looking at. And my start time, I can change that. So, you know, we're looking at the departure planning. If we wanted to leave in 3 days' time, I could actually move this to the 19th and then run my routing from there. And you'll see here, I have a waypoint set. Pretty keen to go to the Galapagos. So I put that waypoint in there. I've got a starboard waypoint, and so it's going to leave that to starboard. And how do I add that is in here, plus minus. I can take that out by clicking on that minus button. And yeah, and you can see the lat long of that. And it's the same with my start, my green start waypoint and my red end waypoint. They are my lat long of in there. And if I move them around, my lat long will move. If I wanted to put them in there, I can type them in. And so, and there's this button here that would take me to where I am. I'm not going to do it because I'm in Auckland, and so that'll come across to Auckland. And if you have an Iridium Go, it will show your little white dot on the screen in the offshore app. And we should probably go to the offshore app now that I'm starting to talk about that. And the data hub will do that too. So, well, this week, next week. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And I am going to share a different screen. And we're going to go to the offshore app. And I wholeheartedly recommend that you all use the offshore app. So you'll see here, I have run the route. And we'll go through all of these settings and have a look at it. But on my screen here, I have all of these highs and lows and different items, different weather features shown on there. And so what that is the GMDSS forecast. So that is written by a meteorologist from the relevant Met area. And then we have a tool that can read all of those different forecasts written by a meteorologist, and we can put them into a graphic. And so that's what you see here. It's very clever. And if I click on one of these, so I click on that there, and I need to move my zoom controls again, and it will say, high seas forecast. And if I click on that, I will actually get the text version. I haven't downloaded the GMDSS for that area, so I can't, but I could go in and download the GMDSS for that area here. And so, yeah, you see it's actually in that area, not this area. So I'm right on the edge. And so I can download those different GMDSS areas. And so this is a GMDS forecast if you've never seen one. And you can see why we made it into a graphical image to warn you, because I read this and my brain goes a bit blurry. So, yeah. But once you've seen the warning, you might want to come in here and read this. And so you can click on it and you can go and read it. So back in here, and I'm going to zoom in a bit so we can talk about a few things here. So we talked before about the over the horizon AIS. In our routing here, we are doing a very similar thing, but it's only taking the snapshot of when I downloaded. So the over the horizon is constantly updating, and I can display it on my chart plotter. This does it in my weather routing, and so I can plan around that, but it's just the snapshot of when I downloaded, whereas the over the horizon is constantly updating all the satellite targets, and in conjunction with my local targets on my chart plotter or on my nav software. So heading into the Pacific, I think this is an essential feature, really, for your fishing fleets. So if you see a fishing fleet, you would want to do what we did before, come over here, add a waypoint, and make sure if your routes are heading towards them, if you're on that course, route around them, don't go near them. Because usually if you see a couple of fishing boats on here, there's probably a lot more. But so we can also see the traffic zones, right? So where the traffic is, we can click on them and see what they are, the different boats. So yeah, that's a really nice feature. And yeah, and whichever way you use it, I'd be using both because I'd like to see them in my routes. And so how this works in here is it's actually looking in a 300 nautical mile radius from my green start waypoint. So, and it's picking up all the targets that we have on the, how would you put it? Well, from the aggregators, from all the AIS aggregators. So the internet-based AIS as opposed to your AIS on board. So it's all this is showing terrestrial and satellite AIS. If you have a data hub, you can actually have your data hub set to also send all your AIS targets back to the aggregators. So you're actually helping everyone out there. So we've got our route. We've just talked about the AIS. And before I got into that, I had my start waypoint and my end waypoint, and you can see we go very ziggy down here. And I suspect that's probably because we get into a whole lot of light airs. And if I just roll forward, yeah, we do end up very light winds. And I'm on one weather model there. I'm on the PWG, and I will talk about weather models a little bit here. So we have the PWG, the PWE, the ECMWF, the GFS, the SPIRE, and the UKMO. So for short-term coastal, the PWG and the PWE do an amazing job, especially if you're in a high-resolution area. Here in Auckland at the moment, the PWG and the PWE are just every afternoon with our sea breeze, they are smashing all the other models out of the park. So doing a so much better job. I've got kids that sail every day, very attuned to what's happening with the weather here in Auckland. They are killing it. We have a validation tool, and I can see it in there as well. So, and when I say short term, I'm talking today and tomorrow. Longer term, these 4 global models, the ECMWF, the GFS, the SPIRE, the UKMO, do a better job. And the ECMWF's the #1 weather model in the world. When you run your weather routing here, it's actually using the 9-kilometer resolution for the entire globe. So your weather routings, whatever you download, the weather route has used that highest resolution possible. What I would particularly take note of for this passage is this model. Reason being is the SPIRE model is run differently to every other model out there. And it updates later. You see here, it's giving me a warning. So this is last night's model run, and we'll look at what model timings when we do our download. But what is cool about the SPIRE model and why I would rate it particularly for this passage that you're doing, or at least keep an eye on it, is that the way that they run the model is that they have, SPIRE has the biggest nano satellite network in the world. And so what they're doing is they're shooting radio waves through the atmosphere, and the refraction they get from that, they can take a whole lot of atmospheric measurements, and they feed all of that information into their weather model. Now, there's 2 things about that. One, it's very timely. So a weather model is run by gathering data. You may remember during the pandemic that there was a lot of discussion about weather models and their accuracy due to the fact that there were less planes in the air, and that was true. And so, but all of this information that's gathered every 12 hours, it's put into this initial conditions file, and then they run weather models, and we run weather models from these initial conditions files. And so that's all the information. That's your radars, your airplanes, your ships, your balloons, all of those things are in these initial conditions files. But SPIRE have this unique data set, and they do sell some of it to ECMWF. I'm aware of, do get some of their data. and I'm sure the other weather agencies do too, but they don't give it all to them, and that data is fed into their model, so it's very timely, and it has, this is my point, is it has full global coverage. So if I zoom out here, this part of the world, there's not a lot going on. You're in a very remote part of the world. There's not a lot of data. And so Spire has a lot of data because they have coverage everywhere in the world. And so we did a study, and in the study we could see that the Spire model would actually beat the ECMWF offshore. So that's why it's there. That's why we like it. That's kind of its strength as a model, is these remote locations. So keep an eye on that. As with all the models and the 6 models, we're looking for consensus across the models and our routes. And if I zoom back in there, the reason that we're seeing this separation here is because of the light winds. So the route is just trying to find the fastest way through. If I turned the motoring on, you'd probably see some straight lines. So we have all our parameters here. Let's flick over to the ECMWF. As I move along the route, I can actually click on the route and see anything at any time. So I click on there. That's the ECMWF at that time. It's got my lat long, the time, and all this information, the current, the waves, the wave direction, pressure, temperature. Pressure, you compare the pressure that you're seeing, the model says, if you're at now, with your barometer on board, good way to validate a model, is pressure going up or down? Is it close to what we are expecting to see in the model? And that's the same as looking out the window. What's the wind doing? Which model's closest to what we've got? Remembering that we're looking at average wind speeds. So we have all these other parameters here. In this part of the world, I would want to look at CAPE, so convective available potential energy. And if I'm going to look at CAPE, I look at rain. And so CAPE and rain together, you need those 2 elements together. Well, you don't need them, you don't want them. But if you do have them together, then you've got potential for thunderstorms. But that warning will come up in your routing. So, one of the things we want to look for in combination is those elements. And so if I just look through and I don't really see them coming together, or maybe down here, rain, so here we've got potential for thunderstorms. How would we deal with that? You'd be aware. You'd know that that there's potential for that. You might sail. You might have reduced sail. You might have at night. At night you might sail with reduced sail. You might be more vigilant on your radar. You might have 2 people on watch at night. The fact is that you've got this information to be prepared. So that's why we have all these different things to look at. But your routing will warn you, which is very cool. So, and just on that point, I need to move my zoom controls again because they're always in the wrong place. If I just click on tables here, what's happened? Oh, we got, oops. There we go. So this is my route. These are all my routes. These are all the different colors of the different weather models. And the reality is, when I look at this, I see them being pretty consistent, which is a good thing. So we've got consensus across the models. Yes, we go into this really light bit. And so that might be something that we would want to consider for our departure time. We looked at those departure times before, and we thought it all looked pretty good, but there's a pretty big period of very light winds here. Might just be that that's something we have to deal with, but that's a long period in light winds. Do we, I mean, obviously this is a massive passage. You're going to have as much fuel as you can carry, but a consideration. And we can see the fuel, the amount of time motoring. If I had that turned on, we actually have, you've got 4 days of motoring. Wind directions, a bit of a variance there. But what I really wanted to show you here, so in here, in our routes, you can see the rain, and then we have the Cape. So those particular dates might be times we want to look out for, where we see those things together. Our wave heights. And so this is what I was talking about before with how once that we run out of wave data, because this is actually when we go onto the ensemble data. So that's something to think about, that lots of that forecast and that route that we're looking at is ensemble data. And then if I come down here, is what I want to show you. I mean, currents, there's a fair bit of ocean current, isn't there? So the router will try and use that to help you, but you do want to be aware that you can run into wind against current, like 2 knots of current with the wind against it, you got 20 knots, 2 knots of current. It's going to make a pretty nasty sea state. Current direction. And so, yeah, here's our roll that we talked about before. So this is our wave routing stuff. This is RMS roll. And you see here we're 2, down to 1. She's pretty smooth. Does shoot up there on the with the GFS. But, I wouldn't think there was anything to be too concerned about there. Vertical acceleration does get a bit bumpy. Is that when we get rolly? No, not so much. So, we might want to think about that, but it's nothing too nasty, I don't think. And no boat slamming. And if I come up here as well, so where was our, somewhere around there, around the 20th, well, 21st. If I come up here and I look at my wave direction, I can actually change these, and I can look at the the wind wave direction, and you'll see that here, and then I can go, well, what's the primary swell? And you can see they're different directions. And so this is why the modeling's going, oh, well, you're going to get, some vertical acceleration or a bit of roll. And so we can use those things to see, how uncomfortable it's going to be or not. If I come over here to the wind tab, so this is an actual routing for each, for each model. And this is where we can come and have a look at the true wind speed, our true wind angle, and our speed over ground. And this is where we can sort of start to back test or validate our polars. If you don't need to sail on a boat for long to know with it in 15 knots. I mean, this is probably the optimum angle, right? 121 degrees in a cat is probably a pretty optimum angle. But do I do 11.2 knots? It's pretty quick for a cruising cat. In 19 knots, these seem pretty realistic, but is this realistic? Do I do 11 knots? And you can sort of look at this, and you could go back and you could adjust your polar a bit. And just make sure that these outputs match up with your polar. So we'll see here we have these little exclamation marks. Let's click on one. So it's warning me about gusts. And so why it's warning me about gusts is that we've got 16 knot average, we've got 28 knot gusts. So when there's a big difference between the average and the gusts, it's basically a severe weather indicator, because if we've got that much difference between the average and the gusts, there's instability in the atmosphere. So that's why it's warning me about that. We've got a lightning warning. And so these are the warnings that I was talking about. And so you would need to sit there and digest everything for quite a while to notice these things. And sometimes we can't do a whole lot about what they are, but sometimes we can. So if I saw some of these and they gave me warnings about vertical acceleration or roll, I'd want to go and look at where that was in the route and see if I could route around it. Yes, wind, the summary of our passage, what all the things that we're doing. I realize that I've been talking for a while and I better speed up and actually do go through the routing. So we have our wave here. This is again where we can see our vertical acceleration and our slamming incidents. And this is where we can also see the directions of the wind wave, the primary swell, the secondary swell. And you see here where there's no tertiary swell, that's because there is none. It's not going to just put it in there because the parameter is there. If there's none, there's none. So that's why it's not there. And so, yeah, you can really spend some time digesting the information off this. And, and we can look at things short term and long term. And so I would dig in for my shorter term stuff. I would, spend a good half an hour or so analyzing the next 12 hours. Obviously, knowing what the weather's going to do for the next 12 hours is important. And the reason I say 12 hours is because then I would do my next forecast, my next download to get my next lot of weather, because that's when the models have updated. So if I come over here and let's turn the AIS off because I'm trying to grab that and it's not letting me. Let's pretend we're sailed down here. Let's go up here and move that waypoint. Let's delete it. So that waypoint's gone now. Whatever reason, we've sailed to here somehow magically. But so, really important. As you move, each time you do a weather download, move your green start waypoint to where you are. As I said, if this is connected to an Iridium Go or a data hub, you can have a little dot on the screen that shows you where you are, or you can get the coordinates from your chart plotter, write them in here, and you have your right coordinates. When I've done this in the past, if I haven't had one of those devices connected, I'll copy and paste the coordinates from the nav software with the GPS off my device, which we now have. You can just press the button and it'll use the GPS off your device. But back in the olden days, you couldn't do that. And it will give you those coordinates and you can bang them in there. So yeah, we've moved our start waypoint to there. And I'm going to come over here, and this is probably really important for this passage. I'm just going to click on this grib button. And so there's a couple of things we can do here. This is our grib area. If you're on Starlink, go for your life, get as much as you want. If you are on a Go or an exec or another lower bandwidth device, you can actually move this area and control your file size. That's the first step in controlling your file size. Something that you can do is you could download this area. You could look at that. That would be your short-term analysis. And then if you wanted to do a longer-term analysis, you could come out here, look at the big picture. You could do that, but you would actually just download one model as opposed to all the models. So I will move this back and come over here and click on download. So over here, we have use offshore optimized settings. If you're on a Go or an exec and you're unsure about how to get there, click on that button and it will set everything up. So if I click on that, you'll see it changes all my parameters. If I'm not on one of those connections, if I'm on a high-speed connection, I can change all these parameters. And I probably still, I can get this high resolution out in the ocean there. I guess it's good because it matches up with our routing, because the router will always use the highest resolution available. We don't need the aroma. I mean, it's not going to download them anyway because they're not in our area. And we can choose all our parameters here. And so this is about controlling your file size. I'm just going to click on next and that's because I've gone high resolution. So if I come back here and I go 100-kilometer resolution, you'll see down here my file size is 256 kilobytes. You could do that on a Go. That would be a big download for a Go, no problem on an exec. It's nothing on your Starlink connection. So you can look at all these different parameters and choose the amount of days. You see I go there and I get a much bigger file size. Still, that would be fine on your exec. And then all these different parameters. I'm going to get the gust and the cape. My start time is now. And this little settings wheel here, I can change those things that we looked at in our polars before. So I can put the motoring on. I'm going to motor it 5 knots if the sailing boat speed falls below 4 knots. My depth, etc. Wave polars on. Comfort settings. So comfort settings that will try and route you around things that you don't want to go in of, wind speeds, higher wind speeds and waves, but I don't use it. The reason I don't use it is I would rather the router went for the fastest route and then I decided that I didn't like something and I'll route around it myself. The router will take you anywhere to get rid of that. And I've just realized that funny little button is not going to let me get off here. Yeah, that one. Close window. Nope. Hang on a minute. I've run into this issue before. There we go. And share screen. Something to do with when you're on a Zoom. So we're back on the right screen again. And so, yeah, so we have weather routing. We want our GMDS graphical and the text. Observations, probably not many observations out there. And then I click on next. And so this is our ocean data. And we could download this before we left if we were on a Go or an exec connection. In fact, if you control your area like we did in the grid area before, you can do this on your exec. But if you're on your Starlink, go for your life and get those currents. It's nice to see them. I'm not a fan of satellite imagery because I've got my GMDSS. I've got my weather models which use satellite imagery. Yeah. So this is important for the rally GPS tracking. We want that turned on so that we can download the positions of everyone else in our rally and we can see where they are. And then we can, compare where they are. We can see their blog posts. Yeah, really cool. So click on next and I'm going to go download all. So before when I changed that grid area and I made it really big, I could just come in here. I could just come to this download page and I could just click on ECMWF and get that 77 kilobyte file. I don't have to download everything every time. Until you replace something in the offshore app, it will be there. So that's a nice thing to remember, is that the and if you don't replace it, it's still there. Which is nice if you disconnect for whatever reason. It's good to know. So here I talked about grid times before. Here we see when each of these models was updated. This is for the time zone of my computer, right? Because I'm on the offshore app. And you'll see here the GFS updated at 6:15 this morning, my time. ECMWF at 8 o'clock. Spire updated at 10 past 9. And the PWE, their time. So a couple of things here. A, when the model's updated. So then you can go, all right, they basically update at the same time every day. Sometimes there's a delay for whatever reason. There's a lot of computing power going on there. But knowing that when they update it is important, so then you can plan that into your day. And the other thing to note here is that you can also see if one of them hasn't updated. If they haven't updated, then you're comparing old data with new data and all the other models. So let's say the ECMWF hadn't updated this morning. I'd be like, well, I'm going to take that information, not, well, I'm going to discard it. And so you see all the things that we've downloaded here. And so you can see here the Mercator Global Currents. That was last updated last night, my time. And that's fine. They update less often because they don't change as much as the atmospheric modeling. And so that's why you could download that before you leave, and you've at least got a pretty good run with it until you run out of forecast time. And as I say, it'll stay there until you replace it. So yeah, and we've got our GMD assess bulletins there, our GPS tracking. That was 86 kilobytes because Kieran added me to a rally before. And I'll click on close, and you'll see here we have all our new data. And you'll see it's a bit more rolly than before. We've got a warning there. Lightning again. And if I come over here to the map, and you will see we have the area that I downloaded. Let's go back to wind. The area I downloaded, we've got through that convergence zone there. And away we go. And we've got two models heading on this northern route here and the rest going down here. I would take the southern route because there's 4 of them in agreement down there. And I suspect it's probably, yeah, something to do with some, just the wind angle. But, so we've got our routes there, and you'll see here we go past the edge of our grid area, and it's like, oh no. But I come back here, so that's now here I would be doing a new model run, a new weather download. So not a biggie so far as our grid area goes, and you can keep moving that grid area with you. As I said before, if you want to look further out, come in here, go on that grid button, choose a bigger area, download, just download that one model for the big area so then you can keep your file size smaller. For your Starlinkers, as I mentioned, this will save all your information offline, and yeah, it's really good to be able to go back and visit it anytime without having to re-download. We don't have any GMDSS warnings in our area there. You'll see that what is cool about this is it does give us a picture of things happening in a wider area. This tropical storm here is being noted. So, it's nice to be able to see this stuff in the wider area. It's got the direction it's going. No, it's not coming towards me, so that's nice. But that'll update every time I do my new download. My ocean data, you'll see here, the currents are pushing us along here. And so we can see the current speed if we click on there. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But if we had the wind coming towards us, which we don't, because we're just looking at the wind, that wouldn't be very nice. But you can see why knowing what these currents are doing is actually really important when you're out there on the ocean. Yeah, it's really strong. But this can also, in those light winds, really keep you moving. So worth noting. GPS tracking. So you can see that I'm here in New Zealand, and I just need to find the rally that I've been added to. So these guys have actually just crossed or crossing the Atlantic. And if I come in here and I zoom in, and so these are guys that in my rally, and so for you guys, you'll all be in the same place. And I can click on one of them, and I can see where they are. Yeah, I can click on these guys and see where they are, what their course is, and what their speed is. So pretty nice if they were, 200 miles away, 300 miles away, or whatever, or 20 miles away. You know where they are, and what they're doing on board. And if they have a blog post, you can actually see that blog post. All right, I realize I've gone way over time, so I will stop sharing and stop talking. Yeah, as Kieran says, if you've got any questions, just reach out to the support team. They're amazing. People like Kieran that have sailed around the world a few times, and most of the support team have done similar. So they're very experienced. They know what they're talking about, and they're there to help you.